for this Zoom call. Hopefully by now, these many months, you've seen Zoom before, but if you haven't, you'll see that in your Zoom window at the bottom, you can roll over a control bar, and it'll allow you to mute and unmute and start your video. And we would just ask that you please, for bandwidth purposes, not use video. And if you'd like to ask a question, you'll see below, you can either raise your hand, which is over there in the bottom of the screen, or you can type in the chat window. And I'll be watching the chat window and also be looking for raised hands. And then once you raise your hand and I recognize you, we'll be happy to have you ask a question of the panelists. In fact, we'd be delighted if you'll ask a question of the panelists, but most people like to type, but please do use your hand raise, and we'd be loving having a dialogue in this conversation. Our three panelists are pretty talkative, so I think you'll find that very intriguing to visit with them by voice. Okay, so this is, again, what we're doing, marketing in uncertain times. Let me start off with just this poll, which we start every event with now, to just get the pulse of the folks that are with us. So in this poll, we're basically asking how y'all feel. And there are 5 levels. It's all doom and gloom, and I'm depressed, and it's only gonna get worse. Or yeah, it's only a little gloomy and doomy. Or 3, it's bad, but I can see clouds lifting. Or 4, it's really stressful, I'm handling it, I'm taking steps, and I think it's getting better. Or 5, I've got this, and I can see the light at the tunnel. So Lori, would you put up the poll? And this is all your practice now to see if you're paying attention. Click on the response that is most representative of how you feel. And we are going to wait for just a second. Usually the first ones take a little longer I'm just checking the number of participants to see how long we need to wait. So let's just wait another couple of seconds here and make sure everybody's had a chance to weigh in on how they feel. And then we actually save these and record them, and every 2 weeks now we have had a snapshot of kind of how we feel about things. All right, Lori, maybe we're there. We just had another one come in, so maybe you know, okay. All right, so today, interestingly enough, we're in the range of 3. It's kind of bad now, but I can see some clouds lifting. We do have a person who's feeling fairly bad, and I feel for them. And we have a far fewer people in this call that see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not gonna say anything about whether that's because we're talking about communication or whether this topic has driven this, or whether just simply changes in the last 2 weeks. Goodness knows everything is dramatically different every week. Have done that. So thanks for that, that response. And then our next one that we also do every one is, how's your budget feeling? So we shared those results, didn't we, Lori? Yeah, we did. Okay, so how's your budget doing? My budget's been increased. It's remained about the same. It's been decreased. It's frozen, or I don't really know, because we're still trying to figure out what we're going to be doing this year. And we'll wait till we get about the same number of responses, because that will clearly kind of get us to where we were. All right, that looks good, Lori. I think we're going to count on about 70% of people responding. Okay, so this one we have more people responding this time that everything is frozen. In the past, we've had a lot of I don't know. So that means that a lot of you have gone through some strategies. You've thought about what you're going to do for the second half of the year, and maybe right now you're just waiting to see when things changed. Significant still, a number of you that have had decreases, and whoever has had their budget increases, you go team. That's awesome. And time to take advantage of what you've got, right? All right, so now that most of you have arrived, I hope, and thanks for joining us, ISBM. This is our town hall. My name is Lynn Yanyo. My picture is over on the far right. And I'm going to introduce our 3 panelists today. We're going to be talking about how things are different and the skills we might not have in order to be in this new world of communicating through electronic devices. And let me just introduce folks. So Jip Inglis joins us from Ascension Growth and Innovation Strategies. Jip is the managing partner there, and he has over 25 years of experience in strategic marketing and general management for multiple Fortune 100 companies, including Procter & Gamble and Dole and Mattel and Walter Thompson Advertising. In his role, he's often charged with developing and implementing game-changing growth strategies for Ascension clients. Ascension provides data analytics, insight mining, strategic marketing, and Salesforce enablement services to industrial and manufacturing, distribution, financial services, healthcare, and business services around the world. So welcome, Jip. And then we have Steve Hurley and Matt Leary, thank you, from Solution Insights. So let me introduce Steve. Steve is the founder and senior advisor at Solutions Insight. He has worked for the last 20 years with a wide range of B2B companies developing and implementing innovative methodologies and tools to better understand customer problems and opportunities. Along with his consulting work at Solutions Insights, Steve teaches an MBA course on solutions marketing at the Holt International Business School and Babson College. He also teaches marketing and sales courses at Tufts. Welcome to you, Steve.
Thank you.
And
glad to be here.
Thank you. And then Matt's joining us also from Solution Insights. He's managing director of Solution Insights. He has spent over 20 years helping lead industrial and technology companies to improve their sales and marketing performance through a range of strategy consulting and training programs. Matt has developed award-winning sales training and enablement programs for a range of firms, including 3M, AT&T, GE, Hitachi, Ericsson, Intel, Nokia, Siemens, and Verizon. And he has delivered those in over 42 countries. Oh, so you probably have other languages you can speak, Matt.
Not a one. I'm a terrible American.
Just thought I'd ask. Unprompted. So in our preparation for this town hall, I will tell you, everyone that's on this call, that this has been a fairly exciting group that I mostly have just stepped back and let it happen. So we're going to try a bit of that today. I will again say to you, everyone, that please feel free to type in a question at any moment that you think of it. I'll make sure that makes its way to the panel. And if you'd like to ask a question and interact, because maybe you have a follow-up question or two that you'd like to ask, and you might convey it better than typing, feel free to raise your hand, and then I'll make sure that you have that opportunity. So we're going to start the session with kind of an open-ended question. I'm going to let Steve talk first, then Jip, then Matt, and give him a couple of minutes, mostly because every week that we do this, new things have happened and things have changed. And so what are you guys seeing? What do you think we should be paying attention to? And kind of where do you want to kind of start some topic areas out? And so Steve, I'll let you go first.
Great, thanks a lot. And I am so appreciative you decided to let me go first. This allows me to pick all that low-hanging fruit on the issues that I think we all know are going on out there. So I'm going to steal a little bit of thunder from my colleagues Jip and Matt on this one. And I'll get into some of the more subtle issues later, but I think we're all seeing the 3 or 4 that I'm about to lay out. The first, of course, is working from home. This is not even a decision companies are making, that's what we have to do now. The issue, of course, is will this be sustainable? What's going to happen when COVID is lifted, vaccine kicks in, and we have options? And I'm going to provide a couple of anecdotes, and truly these are anecdotes more than deep studies of thousands or more people. An anecdote around this is I was talking with a CMO of about $1 billion company just the other day. He's going to be a guest speaker for me in one of my MBA classes. And he was saying that they've decided that the majority of their marketers will continue to work from home. They will not be going to the office. It'll be around, he said, between 60 and 75% of their marketers. He personally is shifting. He used to spend 3 to 4 days a week in the office. He's cutting that down to 2 to 3 days a month. So, you know, that's an anecdote, but I think it exemplifies how a lot of companies are thinking about the work at home. We can talk about all the implications around that. Your poll is one that I had scratched down as a big issue. We're seeing budgets cut. And that seemed to be the trend of what the people on this call were saying, that it's frozen or it's going down. And what we're seeing is not in real dollars as much as headcount. I think companies are finding out that they can do more with less, and they're asking and requiring their marketers to be more efficient and more productive. And if nothing else, we're, I think, going to see dramatic headcount drops. The third is segments. Matt and I had the privilege of being on a call recently with one of the experts at Forrester on sales and sales enablement and marketing as it relates to sales. And she said, well, you know, we have to look at what's happened in terms of new segmentation. And she laid out 3 segments. The companies that are in deep trouble, they're already out, or they're going out, or they're in peril of being out. Those that are basically above water, their nose is above water barely. They're struggling, but they will be probably okay unless things get worse. And those that have found great opportunity. And when you start looking at that, the market in those terms, then your segmentation takes you a lot of new places. your personas will change, your value props will change, how you campaign, et cetera, will change. And I thought that made a lot of sense. And I'll take that last apple, low-hanging fruit, then turn it over to my colleagues. And the last one, of course, is sales contact. And that salespeople are not able to get out in front of their clients the way they used to. And I'll give you an anecdote on this. Now I think this is something that there's a lot of opinions on. I tend to be of the opinion that salespeople are dying to get back in front of their clients. I tend to be of the opinion that most companies are dying to get their salespeople back on the road. One quick anecdote. I was talking to another CMO, and he said that they're very global. And he said that in Australia, just this past week, since Australia now is almost back to normal, he said their salespeople have said, let me out, let me get to them. And they've just given the green light, and their salespeople are basically rushing out the door to make contacts again with their clients and customers. Again, a single data point, but an interesting story that in that environment, they couldn't wait to stop talking to their clients like this, and they wanted to go and visit with them again. So now that I've cleaned out the bottom of the tree on my friends, I think the issues that we all are more or less aware of, I'll sit back for a minute.
Okay, so we're going to pass this to Jip.
Sure. And Steve, thanks for clearing that out. You shortened my remarks considerably now. Now, I would have three comments, and some of these actually do very much overlap with what Steve had said, but essentially we have sort of seen three trends that have sort of come to pass in the last couple months since COVID with clients. And one of them sort of plays off of this notion of working from home. Well, let me back up. Let me say that all three of these trends that we're seeing, what we surmise is that COVID has become sort of a forcing mechanism that has caused catalytic acceleration of underlying trends that we were beginning to see anyway, but have now occurred much more dramatically than we ever would have without COVID. And the question will be, to what extent do we go back to the way we were before? And our assessment is that, in fact, we will not go back all the way to where we were before. We will become a little bit more like what we used to be before. But these causes or these changes have become sort of permanent at a certain level. So what were they? Three of them. One is this notion of working from home. And yes, that's happened. We have seen for a number of years that people are more inclined to work at home. Now they're significantly more so inclined to work at home or being compelled to. The belief is that when this is all over, that notion of people working remotely will stick. People are finding they can be more efficient, and companies are finding that they, in fact, can manage their staff reasonably well. So this will present a whole new set of challenges of how do you build and run a team that you can't sit across a table with day to day, every day. Mm-hmm. That's a skill set that's going to have to be developed by companies. The second is, and I believe Steve had mentioned it, is this notion of remote selling. We've seen data for a period of time that if you take a look at the sales funnel and the way companies, particularly B2B companies, like to buy, they like to do much more remote work. They like to get much farther down the sales funnel before they'll ever engage with a sales representative from a vendor company. And certainly COVID has put that on steroids. We think that will continue. There will be a place, I will differ maybe with Steve a little bit on this in his example from Australia. We don't see that necessarily the level of face-to-face activity that you saw before COVID in the B2B selling world will ever fully return. We think you'll see more of it than you do now. But the reality is that, again, as a forcing mechanism, this is compelled companies to change the way they both sell and companies in the way they buy. Yeah. And some of the remote activity has proven to be pretty efficient. And so we don't think we'll ever go back. There will be a place for salespeople, and it will be, but in very high valued situations and not as pervasive as you see now. The last one is marketing technology. Certainly this kind of environment has been a real impetus for companies to adopt more sophisticated, more capable marketing technologies in whatever form they may be. Virtual meetings, Zoom, AI-empowered systems, and there are a whole plethora of them. But companies were doing that anyway. COVID has become a catalyst for that.
Okay, thanks, Chip.
I'll turn it over now to Matt.
All right, Matt, let's see what you've got.
Well, I've just scratched off 6 of the 7 things I was going to mention. So I'll focus on one that cuts across both what Steve and Chip talked about, and that's skills. We got a real interesting dynamic right now where, and again, I don't want to bring ageism into it a little bit, but there's definitely a population in the sales and marketing world that have deep engagement skills, but limited digital skills. And there is a population in the marketing and selling world that have strong digital skills, but maybe haven't been brought up with the same level of engagement skills that we now need to figure out how to do in this new mix of remote and digital selling. So the first thing, and like Steve and I have had a lot of conversations with our clients, with some prospective customers, their customers. It's really interesting that a lot of people are focusing on their individual skill set right now. I'll give you a few quick examples. I do a lot of work in technology, and everyone in technology has been using Zoom, has been using WebEx for years for remote engagement. But the crazy thing is they're still using what feel like in-person selling tools, like 20-page PDFs and 30-page PowerPoint presentations in a virtual selling environment. And they've always held that, well, when I get in front of you, I'll walk you through this. Or when we see each other, I'll be able to hand over that lovely slick document I have. So this kind of skill gap is really being exposed on being able to kind of use all that good, let's call it pre-digital and digital marketing material that the marketing team's been developing in a virtual environment. The other skill is that's really has become in stark relief is the ability to manage a consultative conversation in a time that's less than 60 minutes. Steve's point about the Australian example, people want to get out and get in front of their customers because they want that day to go to the office. Some of you guys have manufacturing reps, right? And manufacturing reps are in their happiest point is when they can get inside a factory, can get inside a hospital, and walk around and kind of interact, talk to the nurses or talk to the floor manager. That kind of interaction still can be recreated, but you don't have 4 to 6 hours to do it anymore. You're down to 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute interactions. So when we do sales training, and Steve and I have a chance to do a lot of it, brevity and management of that time becomes so important. Because the level of interactions you have, it may be still the same, but the time that you have available to build rapport, start introducing concepts, move a conversation down the road. I mean, it seems trivial, but the reality is you just took away one of the salesperson's greatest tools is to hang around the water cooler or walk the hallways, we used to say. And now that that's gone, there's a real gap. And let me tell you, the buyers do not have the patience for a 2 to 3 hour WebEx anymore. They just don't. They don't have the patience to go to lunch with you. They don't have it doesn't exist in their day. So how does marketing help that conciseness, that focus? And I guess the third part about that is what happens between those conversations. And Chip just really pointed to this, which is this kind of rise of guided selling, right? This idea that I'm not sure what to do between this great qualification call I had now and the next qualification call and how my buyer wants to consume something that I can move him down the road. Again, when I have the flexibility to go see him, go take him out to dinner, go have that kind of interaction, I could feel my way through it. But this more what we call sales cadence and the role in marketing in getting into some of that marketing automation and sales cadence, again, has come into stark relief. So there's some skills, and again, I'll pick up what Chip has said, that are evolving, that have been over the last couple of years, but COVID-19 has really kind of opened that wound or really got people focused on what they need to do different to accelerate those individual sales or sales enablement skills.
If I can, Lynn, if I can follow up a little bit.
No, you can't. You talk too much.
No, that's
Go ahead, Steve. And I warned everyone. So go ahead, Steve.
and it's interesting, this whole skill that I think most salespeople and even marketers think of this tool like Zoom, and they're probably good in presenting. You know, here's the information, et cetera. But Matt used the term being consultative, really understanding how to be consultative. And that means iteration, that means discussion, that means whiteboarding. That probably means multiple people involved. So you're brainstorming, coming up with new ways to do it. Boy, that is a whole new skill set on how to use technology.
Yep.
And I've learned it the hard way. Now I've taught, I'm on my third master's course. I've had between 40 and 70 people that I've had to do this with. And I didn't realize how different it is than the presentation mode that I was used to, you know, doing webinars, et cetera, and just presenting ideas. It is a hard skill to pick up, and it takes time, but it's critical to do it. One thing I've learned about this new technology is when I'm in a room with people, I don't care if it's executives, I don't care if it's students, I get energized, I get them energized. You can bounce ideas faster. There's that. When you're online like this, it tends to pull energy. So once you understand that, you say, okay, I have to be very efficient. How do I do it in a way that makes sense? Because we can't sustain energy for a long time this way. And how do I get to where I need to go quickly and effectively?
Yep.
Okay. All right, great. I love those opening statements. I took some notes and I see I've got some questions coming in, so I'm going to read those too. But first, I thought it would be helpful to get some informing from the folks that are attending and take another poll here. So in this poll, we're just kind of get a feel for where everybody is in this call. So how comfortable is your marketing team with virtual communication tool and clear communication with customers? And you should pick which one best represents you. So they're not comfortable at all, or they're getting more comfortable, but it's still work. We're okay with it, but we wish we could go back to that face-to-face. They're beginning to prefer it, and I think it works well as an option, or we're gonna keep using these tools even when we can go back to face-to-face again. Okay, so we know we've had about 70% of you vote. So, I mean, these are difficult questions, so let me let you process that, but let's see what folks will tell us here. And it's very interesting because it's bimodal so far. So a few more votes might sway it if you can join us. All right, I'm gonna wait for one more. Wow, that was interesting. I can see these in real time, so it's always fun. All right, Lori, let's call this good and show it. All right, so we're getting comfortable, but it's still work. It's interesting that we've got some folks that are starting to prefer it. Some folks would just let's not do this anymore. Can we just go back to face-to-face? So I think, guys, we're reflecting in this group kind of the things that you've been talking about anecdotally, right? So we have work to do to get more comfortable, and some people we have work to do to make them comfortable at all. So that's great. Okay.
Yeah, I think the good news is for the most part, I mean, there's a subset of our buyers that are pretty comfortable with this because they're very distributed. But for a lot of them, they're still struggling to learn this, to just do internal collaboration and manage their own day-to-day jobs. So we're stumbling in this together, which is for some of us good news.
All right, for whatever good reason, I've lost my share, so I'm going to try that again. There we go. Sorry, guys. I clicked one too many times in the wrong place, apparently. Yeah. So just talking about how getting good at this would be good.
Yeah. Well, you know, the comment here, I mean, we're sort of having fun about it, but the comments made by Steve and Matt are very much on point. You know, if you're a marketer or a salesperson in this day and age, I mean, this is almost got to have skills. I mean, this is go back to the day when you had to figure out Word and Excel, and that was just kind of a given. This sort of thing, and understanding this, and if you get into marketing, understanding some of the higher level marketing technologies is very quickly going to become not a nice to have. It's a gotta have. It's table stakes.
I think that's a really good, especially for those of us that have been around for a while, Steve, you and I. And I remember when our sales folks had to learn PowerPoint, and that was a fairly big point of contention. Like, what do you mean I have to learn how to do this?
Yeah.
Can't you just hand me the packet of materials and I'll take it with me on the call? And now, of course, that's just table stakes. They can do that. That's no problem. This is another one of those, right? So we had a great question come in. I'm going to follow down that path of technology. So there's a person who's said, we're using Jamboard as a virtual whiteboard for collaboration. What other tools do you recommend that we should explore to get maximum efficiency on Zoom? Can you give us a good list of things to look at?
Go ahead.
Matt? Okay. No, go ahead.
So I'll just tell a quick anecdote on that. I'm sure a lot of you have had kids home the last 3 months doing virtual learning. And there's a tool in virtual learning called Kahoot, which I'm sure your kids are familiar with if you aren't. I actually have a client or two that's actually using Kahoot during active presentations to Zoom customers to try and engage beyond just polling. That's, you know, it gives a little bit more functionality. It's very clever. The point about Jamboard, just the whiteboarding function inside Zoom, WebEx, and Teams is you got to practice it first. This is, you know, everyone's comfortable walking up to a whiteboard. In most people, other than me, Catholic education, I have terrible handwriting, but most people have decent handwriting in business. That's fine. But that's not a one-to-one transfer to something like Jamboard, whiteboard, or even programming in simple questions in Kahoot. So any of those tools, if you're going to use them, I caution you, I've been on some disaster calls, practice them first. So Chip, Steve, you got another example or two?
You know, I don't. There's a couple of, I can look them up. I've used them. I can't think of them top of my head, but I can send them in to Lynn later if you're interested.
Yeah, I think that would be great, though, if you wanted to make a compilation that we can share.
Sure. I'll pull those out and send them on to you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of, I mean, this may be running a little bit far afield, but a couple of ones that we've sort of encountered or used in the past is, if you think about the fact that if you're going to be remote and you're going to deal across a screen and I can't sit across a table, you trying to make what you are showing a little bit more interactive, a little bit more interesting. Now, there are a couple of tools that sort of do that. One is as an alternative to PowerPoint. There's an outfit or a tool called Beautiful AI.
Yeah.
Beautiful.ai. And basically what this is an AI-driven presentation tool that is much more interactive and interesting than most PowerPoints. If you're very sophisticated, PowerPoint can get pretty close. But otherwise, this is a way to sort of do it out of the box. One of our clients, it's not so much a presentation tool, but for web interactivity and thinking about the web as a tool even when you're not around to, of course, engage with customers, are using a tool called Cirrus. It's not inexpensive, but it's very good at creating very good interactive experiences around a point that you want to sell. And those would be, you know, two examples. And believe me, it's a drop in the bucket because there are literally thousands of them that could be used.
Do any of you guys have experience with Mural?
I saw that in the chat. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't used it with a customer before. I'm curious.
And then I use Envision for my collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
no,
The one thing, and Chip's getting at this, is there's discrete individual tools that as an individual, whether you're a sales and marketing professional, whether you're a teacher, whatever, you have access to. But if you look at some of the sales enablement suites that are out there, and it's very possible I'll give you an example. I've done a lot of work with Salesforce in the past. And by the way, every month Salesforce buys another one of these tools. They've been super aggressive at acquiring or partnering in their ecosystem with a lot of, let's call it sales cadence tools, sales interactivity tools, but a lot of people don't even know what they have. And Salesforce is a perfect example. I had a client that had kind of bought into the suite and had only 2/3 of it active. I said, well, you guys already are subscribing to a part of this service that you're not using. So I would start internally and look what collaboration tools is HR using? What collaboration tools is finance using? What collaboration tools is product management using? Because they're probably pretty valuable. They've already spent the money on them, and they could probably be easily turned into customer interaction tools.
Good.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, because the folks are trying to take notes rapidly on all these tool names. So I'm going to compile that after this with everyone. And then if you were signed up for this town hall, we'll get you a copy of that. So you'll have a list of the tools.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn.
And you'll have everybody's email after this too, so that if you want to, you can even ask the questions about those later.
Lynn, can we get the elephant in the room that was in the chat when the boss says it has to be face-to-face?
Yeah, right. So that's the next one coming in. And so let's go from the tools, and we might circle back to that, to,
Okay.
There's really a huge difference between having these kind of conversations with people that you know already, or that you've already sold to, or you've already been to their plant. But now I'm going to do my very first call with a brand new potential customer. Got to be face-to-face, right? I can't possibly do this without being face-to-face. What do you guys think?
Well,
No.
you know, you can do it. You can do it online. Is it preferable? I don't think so. Post-COVID, would I do a first meeting with an important client this way versus face-to-face? Well, unless I have to fly halfway around the world, I would try and make a way to get there and sit down and start a relationship. I think it's sort of general belief that early in relationships, sort of that touch and feel can be important depending on what you're selling and who your client is. And then as a relationship's established and the trust is there and the credibility there, you can start moving further away. Today's world, that, you know, I think all parties may realize that's just not feasible.
So I'm gonna put you down as your vote is yes, the face-to-face is an important thing, and you have to have it for that very first meeting if you ever can, right?
If you can.
If you can.
If you can.
I'm going to go to Jip next, because I'm saving Matt for last. Jip?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back. And Steve and I were talking a couple of days ago about this, and we probably have a slightly different point of view on this one. I don't think it is. I think it's the traditional way that you always wanted to do that. I think in a perfect world, by the way, if the opportunity presents itself easily, yeah, sure, absolutely. You want to go face-to-face. However, I do believe that what's happened as a result of COVID, again, is a forcing mechanism. It has made people more comfortable with doing the first meeting or other important meetings in a virtual state. And I will tell you, we have actually worked with a couple of clients in the last couple of months, some of whom are new. We've never met. We have literally never met face-to-face, in person. We know them, believe me, very well by Zoom and telephonetically, but we've conducted our business that way. What I think is the customers and clients with whom you would engage are increasingly accepting of that as a more normal way to do business. So I don't think you need to. If you don't,
no, we in some ways we're violently agreeing on this, and over the years, you know, we've done work with a number of clients we never met first off the bat. I guess my first criteria is I'd check with my client and see if they have a strong preference.
Good point.
And if they say, look, you know, I really would like you to come in and spend a day with us, I will try and find a way to make that happen. But to your point, Jip, they may be at this point saying, look, you know, everything's going on. We're used to this. Just let's do it over Zoom. Okay,
Matt, what do you got?
I'm leaning a little bit more towards Jip, and I'll just give you a quick anecdote. In the Wall Street Journal yesterday, there's a story about a CFO of a Fortune 1000 that was recruited and hired completely virtually and may never actually meet the CEO of the company physically in the lifespan of that CEO's time there. So that one was kind of a shock, because I've always leaned from a sales perspective towards Jip, and it's only been accelerated in the last 3 months. One of the kind of factors that affect that is what kind of things you sell. And I think if you have more repeatable solutions that require less consultative interaction, then you're one way or another, you're going to be forced to be more virtual, the level of interaction is going to decrease in this environment, the kind of amount of predictability will increase. I think the gray area is when there's a lot of human interaction needed to deploy your product, your service, your solution. Once you get into these highly interactive Yeah, I do a lot of work in telecom, and a lot of it is services where guys have to go to towers, guys have to go to central offices, they have to put their hands on stuff. And in fact, probably the more valuable salesperson right now is not the account manager, is what we call the sales engineer. Because when they're there and they're allowed to be there and they physically can be there, they're not just fixing things and not just installing things, they're probably selling too. So I think that gray area where really it'll never go away will be those much more selling practitioners, for lack of a better expression, those that have to do what they sell or are involved in the doing of what they're selling. They're going to have to maintain that, even at this point, 6-foot distance, but that human contact. But for the stuff that's got a lot of predictability, that's a lot of canned solutions, I'm not seeing the need, at least for the next 18, 24 months, for a lot of physical interaction.
I think it makes sense.
All right, good. I'm gonna open up the deck again. We're gonna do another poll. If I've managed to do that right. Okay, so just based on this conversation we've been doing, how much has changes in the way you communicate with customers since COVID impacted your ability to sell and grow business, right? So how much of these changes impacted your ability to sell? Okay, so one is, I haven't had much conversation with my customers since COVID. We've just been distracted or we just haven't tried. The second, number two, is it hasn't had any real impact on our customer communications. 3 is some impact with some small changes to our selling and growing metrics. Large impact to our communication with only moderate changes to our selling and growing metrics, or large impacts to our communications with our customers, and it has had large changes to our ability to sell or grow. All right, so I know how many I'm waiting for, so I'm going to see you all vote and see where we are, which just a little bit more informing for our panel guests. Maybe one more vote. Anybody else out there want to? All right. Okay, Lori, let's show it up. All right, so we've had some impact to our customer communications and some changes to our selling and growing metrics for now. It's only been a few months. Many of us have long cycle times for our sales cycle, so maybe we're not seeing that in this current sales cycle, but some of us have seen some large impacts. And that's why they're here, trying to figure out how to get better at this, right? All right, thanks, Lori. We'll put that away for now, thanks. So let's go to some questions that are coming through from folks, primarily, I think, around how we use these tools and what that changes. We had a bit of dialogue a couple of days ago about the changes between inside selling and outside sales. And the fact that isn't really a technology change in so much as it's a structural change on how we support the customers we have. So who wants to be first up to talk about inside versus outside selling?
So when we talked about this, Lynn, I think I used an example that the group might find interesting. Very large IT outsourcing. It used to be more of a channel company. Now it's become really a solutions company that Steve and I have worked with. And they made a decision, this is pre-COVID, this is about 3-4 years ago, that they were going to flip for a couple of reasons, cost of sales being one of them, but also the nature of the relationships that they were developing, which was moving to more frame agreements or year-long kind of supplier agreements from more incidental expense or purchasing, to take their outside sales force and move about 75% inside. And that group that came in had to be retooled. A lot of this kind of retooling, also how to kind of manage the sales cadence, sales conversation differently. And to Steve's point, and partly Chip's point, there was a subset of that sales force that was still kept more for new business development as an outside sales organization. Obviously, they look pretty smart right now because their salespeople are pretty well skilled for this environment, but it was pretty controversial when they made the move. I will tell you, having worked with one of their other competitors, they felt they were crazy, taking guys off the street, taking them out of the hallways, taking them away from the water coolers. But not only did it reduce the cost of goods sold, but it also kind of changed their dynamic about, actually, they ended up touching the customer more from an inside sales management perspective. Maybe, as we said earlier, maybe those contacts are much briefer, much more concise, much more targeted, versus once a month visiting with a box full of goodies or some show and tell. So they were already seeing gains from that flip. Now, whether that's scalable and other companies are reacting to this environment now for that switch, but I thought it was kind of a pretty clever idea.
And you brought up an important point there, Matt, in my mind, the difference between the hunters and the farmers.
Yeah.
Those that are going out, trying to bring in new business, new contacts, new relationships, versus those that are sustaining the client. So, and that could be another, motivator for whether your people are outside or inside.
Steve, that's a very interesting point. We worked with several clients, and actually that distinction that you just called out is one that we have seen play out in a couple of different situations where we may have gone in and helped somebody sort of realign their sales function. And this notion of understanding what they do, and hunters and farmers being sort of different sorts of cats, if you will, and different
Right.
skill sets. And a lot of companies are much quicker to move the customer service / the farmers internally and make them remote. And then you keep the responsibility for anybody outside simply in a hunting role. And that's not a bad way to transition over to this, to be honest with you. But the bigger picture is, as Matt pointed out, we're seeing more and more companies who are transitioning from outside to inside, in part because customers would prefer to do business that way.
Yeah.
And then COVID has become a catalytic accelerator behind that, because now you're in lockdown, you don't have any choice.
So the issue, I think, Chip, and I think we're touching on it, is if you gave me 3 years to make that switch, I would really put some plans in place. But this switch for a lot of companies, maybe many on this call, is happening in 3 months. So when you, Chip, you spend a lot of time on ABM or customer marketing like we do, you literally are tearing up some of those ABM and customer marketing plans, because you may have had this line in the sand, I'm going to do everything at this major conference that happens on September 1st, or these 4 events, these 4 industry events are going to be where I'm going to really build that rapport, and that all that, at least for the next 6 to 9 months, goes out the window. And you really have to listen to your sellers about what they need now to kind of go to that rapidly inside out format. And if you haven't already, you've got to have some conversations with your customers about how that change is happening. Steve mentioned this conversation we had with an expert from Forrester, and she said the first thing they noticed is those that were quick to react to the way their customer changed after March 15th, and that's really in the US when things happen, were the ones that took advantage of it faster. So, you can listen to us as much as you'd like, but the reality is, in some of you have very specific markets that you serve. Right. How are the customers reacting quick enough to what Chip said is kind of this long burn to inside more comfortably, but I want to hear from them as quick as possible on what will work, at least for the next year or so.
And I want to put up this next poll and see if we can add to what we're talking about here. So this is a question for all of you around, at what stage in the sales process has a reliance on virtual communications negatively impacted your business, right? So like we're talking about, we had to make this change in March. Click all that apply. So let's run that poll, Lori. So click all that apply where the current new method of communicating had negative impact on you in this last 3 months or so. And so pick as many as have had challenges with these areas, and this one could have many, many votes. So you can put more than one on it, which means it's going to take just a minute longer because you're going to click a few more times.
Sure.
Yeah, let's give it another 5 seconds or so. Okay, I think we've got most of the voting in there. All right, Laura, you want to show what we've got? All right, so, okay, it's been hard to close this way, right? Very little on lead generation, although, it's at the far end of the cycle and we might not have noticed it yet. But generally across the board, it's been hard. So, just feeding back to the panel, we feel it in the sales cycle. The question that when I'm listening to you guys talk that worries me is that as we move to having our senior salespeople who have been very, very good at selling face-to-face and say, okay, so you can't now. Do we risk losing some of those guys to early retirement or just moving on because this isn't they're good at it? No. Somebody take that.
You know, the data shows that in general, so Chip and I, we were talking about this when we were preparing for this, there have been several waves in the last 20 years, right? We had .com, solution selling kind of came out of that. We had the Great Recession, this move to more provocative or challenger sales. And of course, this current activity we're going through is really accelerating digital. Each one of those bumps in the road and follow-on skill sets has yielded a 20 to 30% turnover in salespeople and a decrease in the traditional account manager role. At the same time, other skills have risen. The sales engineer, the sales support, the ABM marketer is now basically an adjunct member of the sales force. So the number of people that are involved in the sale may not change, but that kind of core role of an account manager might migrate, and the number of people that have that title might actually shrink a little. That's kind of my initial reaction to that.
So let me take it from a slightly different perspective. I suspect that senior people that have proven to be successful, they've been rainmakers, they've had a good career in sales. They will continue to have a really good career in sales, even if they're doing it remotely. They're good salespeople. They know they know the occupation. You may lose some, not because they're not competent, but because they don't enjoy that model. They'd enjoy they're not getting psychically what they want out of it that they've enjoyed as part of the job for years. So I don't know what percentage that looks like. Matt, threw out some pretty big numbers, but I can see a number of people saying, I've got it. My kids, the college is paid for, blah, blah, blah. I don't need this. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't get me jumping out of bed like it did before. I'll find something else. But those that want to stay in the game, I think they're good enough and they'll be able to transit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think both Matt's and Steve's points are excellent, by the way, and right on point. I mean, the reality is this is a new game. Some people will be able to adjust. I'd say new game, somewhat new game, and others less so, either because they don't have the right skills or they choose not to. So do you run the risk of losing some people? Yeah, probably do. But that's, in some ways, it's just natural evolution.
Yeah.
So
frankly, I'm guessing you're going to lose more of your mid-level salespeople.
Yeah.
Because they won't be able to ramp up well enough to adopt the new competencies as well as good salespeople will. Yeah.
The point that actually just that last poll, there is definitely the closing thing, we call it the closing black hole that we see, or mean time to close, or whatever you want to kind of look at from a metric. That's endemic of some problematic skills. And COVID is going to heighten those. They're going to expose some of those. And this gets back to who stays, who goes, who becomes moves into another job. Fortunately or unfortunately, marketing has got the best perspective to kind of see where those skills are maturing. The closing thing is a function of budget and uncertainty and all that, but it's also a function of, did we actually set up that transparency early in the sales process so I know who needs to be involved, when you're going to make a decision, what you need to make your decision, that kind of stuff. So we could kind of fudge those, and that Steve's talking maybe about that middle rung of salespeople, those kind of skill sets we could get away with, that we fudged them before. Marketing can really step in, whether through automation. I saw someone mention Seismic in the chat. Some of these tools that kind of, for lack of a better word, force the sales cadence when control goes to this kind of virtual environment where every little virtual interaction really matters versus a trip to the customer today or a trip to the customer tomorrow. So these are just endemic of maybe some of those less performing middle of the road salespeople that might be doing something else in 6 to 9 months.
Great. So we're getting close to the hour, and I want to make sure that all of our folks that have spent the time with us today can take away some things. So I'm going to ask each of you to give us 1, 2, 3 things that we as marketers should be doing to get better at this, or to make our organizations better at being able to communicate and do robust robust sales and marketing without face-to-face interaction? And I'm going to start with Jim.
Yeah, well, I think there are I guess I would offer up two, and it all is premised on the belief that things will in fact never go back to exactly the way they were before COVID, and a more virtual world will be the reality going forward. Maybe not as much as we see right here today, but it will be more virtual than it was. Therefore, two things if you're a marketer. One is you need to become skilled at the use of virtual tools, be they of any kind, not just video conferencing, but all of the technology tools that facilitate marketing and sales at a virtual level. And the second part of it then is not only personally do you need to do that, you need to do that to ensure your own career success, but organizationally, develop plans so your company or organization, as it may be, can do the same thing. And what does that look like? And I guess the overarching thought on this is would be careful about drawing a lot of distinctions between sales versus marketing, because the more virtual world also drives more unity between those two functions. So it's not so much sales and marketing anymore, it's almost a revenue generation function.
Great. All right, Matt.
So I'm just going to pick up on the skills thing real quick from Jip. This is the golden age of getting access to these skills. There is, from guys like us and a lot of vendors have really opened the wardrobe and either very cheaply or for free to get access to a lot of these skills, because guys like us want you to you finally are interested in what we've been talking about for the last couple of years, and there's a lot of this out there. So when you step back and you say, boy, what can I do in the next 6 weeks? It's going to slow down a little. I'm going to get into summer. Go and look at either the massive online catalogs, go and look at the vendors in the market and learn from it. Someone, again, mentioned Seismic, Salesforce. These guys are giving away a lot of the fundamental stuff that Chip's talking about because they want you to get skilled up fast. So take the first thing I do is I map, if I look at 10 things and I find a list of 10 things that need to be done better for virtually, I think we probably listed 9 of them on this call. Where am I going to get that information? Go get it. It's probably free. The other point I'm going to make about how this impacts the kind of virtual selling process, and Steve and I did a lot of work on solutions development. That's actually kind of where we came from, this idea of taking products, services, putting together. And over the last 10 years, we've gone closer to agile solutions development. So if you think of agile product development, we're now going to move into agile sales enablement. Okay, and what agile sales enablement will be, there won't be one catalog that'll be published once a month that'll have all the PDFs and all the marketing documents. We're going to have to get into a level of collaboration that on a daily basis, marketing and sales are working together for basically agile sales enablement development. And that's where you're going to have to get really, really focused on what does the buyer want, what matters, what enables that process. These aren't going to be 30-page PowerPoints. They're not going to be 60-page PDFs. They're not going to be 40-minute videos, right? They're going to be very punchy, short stuff that moves the conversation down the road. And all you need to do is, for me, is to look at my teenagers and see what agile sales enablement is. These are very short. Look at some really good TikToks. Look at some really good YouTube Live or Instagram Live. You'll see that it isn't just about the flash and the kind of production value. It's how clearly you can get your message out for each stage of that process. And the ones that are quicker to agile sales enablement, they're taking those massive libraries of documents and content and parsing them for that sales cadence. They're going to keep I think the customer more attentive, capture their attention more in this kind of virtual selling environment. Those are 2 of my key takeaways.
All right, Steve, you get to wrap it.
Well, Chip and Matt, that was payback for me getting the low-hanging fruit earlier. As they just stripped everything else that was on the bottom of the tree on that. So there's no sense me talking about skills, but I will quickly point out something I mentioned earlier because it keeps coming back as I think about these issues and talk to people, et cetera. And that is, if I were a marketer today, and if I have customers maybe in different industries, different segments, I have to think about my segmentation more seriously, because the customers that are getting crushed are behaving and need things very differently than they did 3 months ago from me. And I need to know that. So I need the skills and capabilities to get closer to my customers than I ever have and really understand where they are today and where they think they're going to be in the next month or the next year. And each customer may have a very different story. Some may need me to lend them credit. I may have to push out, things that they can't afford or pay for. And they want me to help them get it through. Or others may say, we're fine, let's do business as usual. Others may say, you need to, as a company, you need to ramp up for me. And you wouldn't have known that because they all look the same color, same type 3 months ago. The world's changed. So I guess my core message is spend more time really understanding how this is impacting each of your key customers, and then design with your salespeople strategies to meet those needs and help them get through it.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to make sure that we land on this at the end, but if you want to continue the conversation with any of the folks on the panel, you've got Jip, Steve, and Matt's email addresses there, or you can always reach out to me at my address, or Rand or Becky, and we'll make sure we're connected. I do want this last poll, please, before you all go away. And I'm doing that with that last bit that I'm going to tell you, which you're going to earn yourself the list of 10 things that you need and the list of technologies that you ought to be looking at. But would you please, Lori, pick this one up? I just need some feedback on the town hall so we can keep improving. It's not what I expected. It wasn't valuable. It was pretty good. It was outstanding. Please vote and let me know how we did so we can know how to get better. And then while you're voting, I'm going to tell you that there's a few more things coming up. So we've redone all of our education courses, and they're now online in bite-sized bits. So none of the courses runs more than a few hours on any one day, and some of them then run for several days. Okay, let's put the poll results up. Wow, that's pretty uniform. Thank you much, everybody. Again, I promise that I'll go back to our panel and make sure we've gathered up our lists of ideas and things and shared them with you. So thanks for that. Let me go back to this previous slide here so you can see everybody. And then, so I'll encourage you to go look at our curriculum that we've got. Our town halls will continue through the year, probably about one a month now instead of one every 2-3 weeks, and webinars as well. So please join us at isbm.com/events, and you'll see all the things that are coming up. I want to thank Steve and Matt and Jip again. This was really great. In fact, you've got a lot of those compliments that have come in through the chat window. I'm really, really glad that we were able to spend the time here today. So if I get any further questions, I'll forward them to you guys, but I'll just expect that maybe we've managed through this technology to create some new friends that you didn't know, and now you'll be able to talk to them.
Great.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, guys.
We're gonna stop recording here.
All right, thanks for the
Take care.